Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. We are from group 5 and in this video we will be presenting about the Fiqh Muqaran of the issues in giving hibah and wasiyah in Islam. This is the members of our group 5. So the first presenter will be Nur Wadaah binti Jamal. The second presenter will be Aalaa Aliah binti Md Zainudin. And the third presenter is me myself, Ahmad Naimuddin bin Rahim. And the fourth presenter will be Fatin Nazurah Sufi binti Sufian. And the fifth and the last presenter will be Nurin Jazlina binti Khairuddin. Next, in this presentation, we will presenting about the introduction and objectives of our topic, and then we move to the second part, which is the concept of hibah in Islam. Then we move to the third part, which is the concept of wasiyah in Islam, and the fourth part will be the Fiqh Muqaran of the issues in giving hibah and wasiyah in Islam. And for the last part is the conclusion for our topic.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Wadaah binti Jamal as the first presenter for our group today. First of all, I will explain to all of you the introduction for our topic. As for introduction, according to Islamic law, hibah and wasiyah are two essential estate planning tools. Hibah is a grant of property that occurs during the life of a hibah provider. Meanwhile, wasiyah is a grant of property that occurs after the testator's death. Both of these devices are supported in Islam because if executed correctly and in accordance with the Sharia standards, they can avert conflicts and property disputes. Hibah and wasiyah can also assist indigent relatives. There is a view that employing hibah and wasiyah, a person violates the Islamic inheritance law known as faraid. So this is not accurate because each instrument has its own emphasis and place in Islam. So the objective for our topic today is to explain the concept of hibah in Islam. Secondly, to identify the theory of wasiyah in Islam. And last but not least, to analyze the Fiqh Muqaran of issues related to giving hibah and wasiyah. Now, we move to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Aalaa Aliah binti Md Zainudin, and I will proceed with the concept of hibah in Islam. According to Nazurah Hisham 2010, hibah can be defined as a contract of giving property made by a person voluntarily to another person during his lifetime without any return or reward. Hibah means gift. This is a grant of movable or immovable property that occurs during the life of the grantor. We are going on to the pillars of hibah. There are 4 pillars or conditions that must be met. First, al-wahib, hibah provider or grantor. The giver of hibah is an ahliyah who is perfect in intellect, probity and rushd. They must also own the endowed property and have full authority over it. Second, al-mawhub lahu, which is hibah recipient. The recipient of the hibah must have the ability to own property, whether mukallaf or non-mukallaf. If the recipient of the hibah is not mukallaf, such as no yet property or disabled, then the hibah can be given to his guardian or trustee. Al-mawhub lahu, the property bestowed. The property to be hibah must be halal property, valuable according to Islamic law, under the ownership of the hibah giver, able to be handled over the hibah recipient, and exist when the property is hibah. Lastly, sigah. Sigah is say, ijab and kabul, words or deeds that carry the meaning of giving and receiving a grant. Hukum and applications of hibah. Hibah is a practice that is sunnat or favorable and is encouraged in Islam. As Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala say in the Quran Surah An-Nisa verse 4, but if they freely give anything of it to you, then take it in satisfaction and ease. Can the hibah be cancelled or withdrawn? There have been debates among experts or fuqaha as to whether the mentioned hibah can be withdrawn. According to the Hanafi school of thought, the law of the giver withdrawing a hibah is makruh, and he can cancel the hibah even if there has been a surrender or qabd, unless the hibah is made in return or iwad. According to the opinion of the Shafi'i school, Hanbali and some fuqaha of the Maliki school, the withdrawal of hibah can occur if hijab and qabul occur without the surrender of the hibah property. However, if the delivery and receipt of goods or qabd occur, then the hibah cannot be withdrawn unless the hibah is made by the father, including mother, grandfather, grandmother and others, to his children. According to Azizi, Nur Shahira and Haid Zulkifli 2020, overall, the scholars agree that cancellation of hibah is acceptable if it is done by mutual agreement between the hibah provider and receiver or by a judicial order. That's all from me. Going on to the next presenter.
Next, we move to the third part of this presentation, which is the concept of wasiyah in Islam. So, what is wasiyah? Literal meaning of wasiyah is to command or to instruct or to obligate. Wasiyah is originated from the Arabic word which is wassa, which means connecting or delivering. In other words, it connects or delivers someone's good deeds during his lifetime to be rewarded later after his death. So the technical meaning for wasiyah is a gift or contribution by a person to another person or another party after his death, whether the will is done verbally or otherwise. So, technically, wasiyah is a special pledge to donate something after death. So, maybe some of us still confuse between wasiyah and faraid. So, the wasiyah or will is an ikrar a person made during his lifetime regarding his property or the benefits of his property to be executed for charitable purposes or any other purpose permitted according to the Sharia law and after he dies. Wills or wasiyah are used for the division of property to non-heirs and are limited to the 1/3 of the wealth. Meanwhile, for faraid, is the division of property that has been determined by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and the division of the property is specifically for the heirs only. Next, let's look at the evidences of wasiyah from Al-Quran and Hadith. From Al-Quran in Surah An-Nisa verse 11, we can see that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has clarified that the division of property, which is faraid, should only be done after the settlement of the debts or the execution of will or wasiyah of the dead person. And from Hadith riwayat Muslim, from Abdullah bin Umar radhiyallahu anhuma, upon hearing this hadith, he said that, I have not spent a night without having my will written along with me. From this hadith, it shows that the importance of having a will or wasiyah for us Muslims. Next, let's look at the pillars of wasiyah. There are 4 pillars in wasiyah. The first one is the testator. The testator must be a mukallaf which have reached puberty and maturity and also free and willing as well as the owner of the property. The second pillar is the will recipients, and the will recipients must be known individuals, exist at the time of the death of the testator, and also having the rights to own the wealth and also non-beneficiaries. The third pillar is the will property. The properties that are will either movable or non-movable or have valuable benefits according to Shara. And the last pillars of wasiyah is sirah. Sirah may take place whether in the condition of sarih or kinayah, verbally, in writing, or by gesture. Next, we look at the types of wasiyah. There are 4 types of wasiyah in Islam. The first type is absolute will. The absolute will is a will that is done freely and is not bound by certain conditions that are imposed on the inheritance that may be included by the testator. The second type is conditional will. The conditional will is a will that contains certain conditions imposed by the testator. The juries agree that the conditions imposed in a will are valid as long as they do not violate the Islamic law. The third type of wasiyah is a generic will. A generic will is a will made in general, such as to the people of a village or a city. And the last types of wasiyah is the specific will. A specific will is intended specifically for particular party. And that's all from me. We move to the next presenter.
Back with me again. Now we move to the next part, which is about Fiqh Muqaran of the issues in giving hibah and wasiyah in Islam. So the first issue is about giving hibah to non-Muslim. In Islam, there are 2 terms for charity, which are sadaqah mafruḍah and sadaqah tatawu'. Sadaqah mafruḍah, known as simply zakat, such as zakat fitrah and zakat harta. Meanwhile, sadaqah tatawu' is a sunnah, encompass other forms of giving like grants, presents, and so on. So according to Kitab by Imam Shafi'i, it is legal and permissible to giving hibah to non-Muslim. This ability is based on the Surah Al-Mumtahanah verse 8, meaning that Allah does not forbid you from dealing kindly and fairly to those who have neither fought nor driven you out of your homes. Surely Allah loves those who are fair. In this verse, Allah make it clear that giving kindness to non-Muslim is permissible, especially for those who are still close to relatives, neighbors, friends, or others. Regular alms, grants, presents, supporting each other, and several other types of social good are one way of doing good to non-Muslim. Besides that, according to Hanafi scholars, it is also permitted to give property outright to non-Muslims such as Jews, Nasrani, Magians, or others. In a book known as Al-Nutafi Al-Fatawa by Sheikh Ali Al-Sakti, it is stated that it is allowed for Muslim to grant the non-Muslim that seeking shelter and protection in an Islamic country. So, we can conclude that giving hibah to non-Muslim is legal and permissible.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fatin Nazurah Sufi binti Sufian. Now I will proceed with the next issue, which is giving conditional hibah. Conditional hibah is a grant that is required by the occurrence of something. And conditional hibah also is considered as a contractual hibah in which the settler sets specific conditions to the hibah contract or the akad in order for the ownership transfer to take place. For this conditional hibah, there are 2 views among the scholars. And now we go to the first view, which are from Shafi'i scholars, a view from Hanbali scholars, and also Zahiri. They say that any future terms or conditions involving hibah are illegal or invalid because of the jahalah that might happen, and also the hibah might be an invalid contract. But for the second view, which are from Maliki and Hanafi scholars, and also some of the Hanbali scholars, which are Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Al-Qayyim, they said that hibah with a conditions is valid because they depends on their depends, and also their opinion is based on the legal maxim al-mawa'id bisurati at-ta'aliq takunu lazimah, which means promises in the form of ta'liq, which is condition, is binding. According to Imam Malik, whoever makes a pledge to perform any good it is binding for him to implement save at death or insolvency. And according to the Maliki school of thinking, hibah contracts containing future conditions are lawful since uncertainty or the gharar has no bearing on the contract's legitimacy. And next we go to the types of conditional hibah. There are two types, which are al-umrah and also al-rukbah. And now we go to the concept of the types of conditional hibah. Okay, for the first one is al-umrah, which is a gift during the life of the hibah recipient or hibah provider, with a condition that the property is returned after the death of the hibah recipient. Okay, for the next point is, if the hibah recipient dies, then the hibah property is to be returned to the hibah provider. Meanwhile, if the hibah provider dies, then the hibah property will be returned to the heirs of the hibah provider. For example, I give hibah this land to you when you are alive, and if you die, the property is returned to me, and if I am still alive, and to my heir if I have died. Okay, for the hibah al-rukbah, which is a gift which puts death of either the hibah provider or recipient as the condition of hibah ownership to the living party. Which means if the hibah provider dies, then the hibah property will be returned to the hibah recipient. However, if the hibah recipient dies, then the hibah property will be returned to the hibah provider. Okay, for example, this line, I give to you as rukbah, and if you die first, then the property will be returned to me, and if I die first, then the property is for you. Next, we go to the fuqaha opinion on the conditional hibah. Here we can see that the fuqaha have unanimously agreed that it is not allowed to grant ownership for a hibah that will become effective or that will be happen in the future. And most of the Islamic scholars' opinion that temporary hibah such as hibah umrah and hibah rukbah is considered as valid, but the conditions are considered as void. Okay, we go to the next issue, which is giving wills or wasiyyah to the heirs. There are two views regarding these issues, and the first view is from Maliki scholars, second view from Shafi'i scholars, and a narration in the school of Imam Ahmad. There are two evidence or there are two arguments regarding this view, which is from hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah and also from the Surah An-Nisa verse 12. And the second views are from the final opinion in the school of Imam Shafi'i and also the school of Imam Ahmad and one opinion in the school of Imam Malik. And there are three arguments, which is hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, hadith narrated by Ad-Darqutni, and also Qiyas. Okay, now we look at the first views from the Maliki scholars, second view from Shafi'i scholars, and a narration in the school of Imam Ahmad. Okay, from the first argument, which is from the hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, we will be looking at the apparent meaning of the hadith. Okay, for the second argument, which is from the Surah An-Nisa verse 12, it is stated that granting a will to certain heirs may harm the other heirs, and this action has been prohibited by Allah in the Surah An-Nisa verse 12. And to conclude from the first opinion, we can see that the scholars have agreed that the wills or wasiyyah that have been given to the heirs is void or invalid absolutely, despite obtaining the permission from all the heirs. Okay, now we proceed with the second view, which is the final opinion in the school of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, the school of Imam Ahmad, and one opinion in the school of Imam Malik. There are three arguments, and the first argument is from the hadith narrated by Ad-Darqutni, which means a legacy to an heir is not allowable unless the other heirs are agreeable. Imam As-Suyuti, Imam Al-Bayhaqi, and Imam Ibn Mulakin condemned that this hadith is weak, but Imam Az-Zahabi said that the sanad of this hadith is good. Okay, now for the second argument, which is hadith narrated by the Abu Hurairah, the meaning is Allah has appointed for everyone who has a right which is due to him, and no bequest must be made to an heir. From this hadith, we can see that one cannot leave a will to an heir if the heir does not receive his right and is dissatisfied with the property distribution. But if the heir is satisfied with the share he has received and also agrees to the execution of the will for the other heirs, he must leave the will for the other heirs. Okay, now we proceed with the last argument, which is qiyas of a will to an heir that has priority over a will to a non-heir that surpasses 1/3 of the deceased inheritance. Okay, from this qiyas, which is we can see that if the permission is gained from the heirs, a will to a non-heir of more than 1/3 of the deceased inheritance is required. Same goes to the giving will to the heirs by receiving the permission from the other heirs. Okay, from this view, we can conclude that according to the Mufti of Federal Territory, they believe that it is necessary or it is permissible to give part of the property to the heirs if it is done with the consent and also the permission from the other heirs. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurin Jazlina. We will continue presenting to our last issues, giving wasiat more than 1/3 of the wealth. We know in our religion, portion of property that can be bequeathed by a testator according to Islamic law, requirement is only 1/3 of the net assets available at the time of death. Therefore, wasiat that exceeds the rate of 1/3 of the testator estate is invalid unless the heirs agree to the excess rate. If the heir agree the wasiat with amount excess of 1/3 valid, if not agree, then the wasiat only valid 1/3 and the excess become inherited property. This is based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which means Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas said, "The messenger has come to see me while I was in Mecca. I said, O Allah, Apostle, I have much property and no heir except my single daughter. Shall I give 2/3 of my property in charity?" He said, "No." I said, "Half of it?" He said, "No." I said, 1/3 of it? He said, "You may do so, though 1/3 is also too much, for it is better for you to leave for your offspring wealthy than to leave them poor, asking others for help." Hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. From this hadith, we can conclude that Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas have so much property, so he decided to give charity to someone who in need because he have no heir unless his single daughter, and that he asked Prophet ﷺ about giving 2/3 property in charity until he said only 1/3 of it, and then Prophet answered that you can just bequeath your property that 1/3 of it, and actually 1/3 is a lot. The rate of wasiat depending on two situations. For the first situation, have the heir. According to Shafi'i and Hanbali scholars, the wasiat that exceeding 1/3 are valid if it is proved by their heir or not. Then, according to Zahiriyah and Malikiyah opinions, a wasiat that exceeds 1/3 cannot be enforced even if it is proved by the heir. For the second situation, if they do not have the heir, according to Maliki and Shafi'i, it should not be wasiat are exceeding over 1/3 because the more is right of Muslim and Baitul Mal are heir at that time. According to Hanafi and Hanbali scholars, if the testator does not have the heir, the rate of their wasiat exceeding 1/3 of their property is valid. Although the maximum amount of the property that can be bequeathed is 1/3, the companion and fuqaha have agreed that the best amount to be wasiat should not exceed the said maximum amount. The companion themselves, such as Sayyidina Abu Bakar, Sayyidina Ali, Qatadah, and member of Basra Fiqh, did not giving wasiat 1/3 of their property, whereby each of them only wasiat 1/5 of their properties. Next, according to Al-Sha'bi, most scholars tend to wasiat at only 1/4 and 1/5 of their properties. And last but not least, Sayyidina Umar only giving wasiat 1/4 of his property. As for conclusion, wasiat and hibah are two major instruments of estate inheritance planning that efficient and increasingly wide in this era. Both of them have their own particular position in Islam from the angle of legislation and how it is implemented. These two instruments should be managed properly and meet the requirement of Islamic law. Thus, the fate of the next who are in need will not be neglected. As a result, Muslims have our right to choose instruments that suit their own circumstances and meet their needs. That's all from us. Thank you.